Today you hear the gospel reading of Mary and Martha as told by the gospel writer Luke. It is a much simpler story than told by the gospel writer of John. There you've got the brother Lazarus and the raising of the dead and all kinds of, just a much simpler story. And in the simplicity of this story, the text begins as they, plural. Plural means it's Jesus and his disciples and followers. So you know there are at least 13 people, maybe more. 13 people come, and as they come, they enter into this certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed them into her home. You know, when you read this story with 21st century eyes, we kind of lose some of the scandalous of this, of what's happening in this text. It is almost as innocent as asking after church, are you free to go to Sunday brunch? But in first century Palestine, it was not right for a single woman to approach a man on the street, let alone for her to invite a man into her home. And now this woman is not only inviting a man, she's inviting 13 men into her home. There were other people in the village. Why would Martha do such a thing, asking this Jesus? I have my own answer, and the answer I have is, I think Martha came to Lahui Lutheran Church last week. And I think she heard a spectacular sermon on the Good Samaritan. And it ended with the phrase, go thou and do likewise. And this was just the neighborly thing to do to somebody who came to town. But maybe it was just she wanted Jesus in her life and in her home. But whatever the reason, Jesus accepts the invitation. Now Martha is a kosher Jew, which means dinner is from scratch. She can't run to Costco to get a prepackaged frozen entree, followed by a Betty Crocker cake mix. And while she is in there trying to get everything pulled together for a 6 o'clock sit-down formal dinner, Mary, her sister, is sitting out there at Jesus' feet. Technical term, she wants to be his disciple. And she's discussing the finer parts of theology and Greek nuances. That is not Mary's place, nor is it her role in Jewish society. What she should be doing, her proper role, is to be in the kitchen helping Martha. And you can feel the tension building as the time for dinner gets closer and closer. And you hear Martha banging the pots and pans around louder and louder in the kitchen, letting her displeasure be known. And yet Mary's response is just to talk louder above the noise and the racket. And finally, enough is enough. Wiping her hands on her apron, Martha comes out and says, Lord, do you not care? And what you hear in that is not just resentment for Mary, but resentment towards Jesus. And that Jesus is allowing this to happen to her. She's the one that went out on the limb. She's the one that took the risk. She's the one that invited him in. She's the one that wants him in her life and her home. And now look at what's happening. It just isn't fair. She's doing all the work. And Mary is just enjoying it. I think she should quote the Apostle Paul. No work, no eat. You ever feel like you're getting punished and penalized for doing all the right things? And you seem to do more and more. And no matter how much you do, it's never quite enough. And no matter how much you do, it's not only not enough, but it seems to have negative consequences. For centuries, people have read this text of Mary and Martha, and they always said, Martha is the doer in the church, and Mary is the contemplation, and it's better to be the contemplation. That is a very dangerous thing for preachers to preach. Because if you really believe that, then tomorrow morning, no one's going to be in here to volunteer to clean up the church. They'll all just be sitting at home reading their Bibles, going, On the other hand, if you say Martha is the better one of the two, then you end up saying, we've got a very, very busy church, but nobody knows why. We just go out and do all kinds of stuff. But I think as you read this text, it's not as simple as are you one or the other. And you begin to hear that in Jesus' concern for Martha. He comes, Martha, you are worried. You are distracted by so many tasks. The Greek word is paraseo. It literally means dragged around. You are dragged around from this to that, to there, to over here. And as you get dragged around in all those different directions, you begin to forget who you are and whose you are and what is the center of your life. I think sometimes our culture is suffering from Marthaism disorder. Marthaism disorder, as we all seem to be pulled around and distracted, dragged around literally from this thing to the next. Think about it. I know already. You can sit down and you can tell me what you've got to do this week. You've got something planned on Monday and Tuesday. You know what's crazy is we have a wonderful youth group. There is not a single day in the week where we can all meet together. Because they all have way too many things as they have to go to this event and that sporting event and this practice. And it's easy for the church to get up here and say, that is wrong, the church has to be first and you got blah, 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 blah. But then people just end up leaving here feeling guilty and ashamed because it isn't. We suffer from Marthaism disorder. We celebrate phrases like on demand, instant access, 24/7, and we hold them up as if this is a good thing. And even if you're on vacation, pick up a book, 101 Things to Do in Kauai. You can't pack them all into 1 week of vacation on Kauai. And even if you come here and don't plan to do anything, you know what's waiting for when you get back home. Yesterday after the funeral, we were sitting around just visiting and whatnot. One of our members came up and says, you know, Pastor, since I've been retired, I am busier now than I've ever been. Pulled in so many directions all at once. I truly believe the people of God are as committed to the life and the faith as we have ever been. I think we are like Martha, and we invite this Jesus into our lives and into our homes, and we want his love to be part of us. And yet in that commitment to Jesus, we begin to realize our lives are already overcommitted. And somehow now this love of Jesus is something else I've got to pack into an already overpacked life. We get dragged from one thing to the next. And as we go from one to the next, we get noisier and noisier with our pots and our pans as we struggle to get it all done. And there's this growing resentment as you look at your neighbors, and they've got a lot better than you do, I know, and they do. And it seems like you who try to do the best you possibly can end up getting punished for it. Is this really the good life God intends for you? Is this the fullness of life God intends for his children? Are you sure? Or Martha responds, Lord, don't you care? We're your faithful people. Other people don't come to church all their lives and they're doing fine. I could be at the beach right now. Don't you care? Other people spend all their income on their own toys. I give some of mine to the church. Don't you care? Should my life be a little better than my neighbor's, for crying out loud? They answered Martha to the church. The church mimics her answer. Lord, tell those people to get themselves in the church and don't just give their leftovers. You know, I love to work with churches when they're in conflict, but there are certain phrases I look for. One of the phrases when I hear it, and I know we're in deep trouble, someone will always get up and say, there ought to be somebody around here who can. You know they're looking at their neighbor saying, somebody else can do it, and you should be able to, and you should be able to, but not me. In all the activities and demand, Martha loses sight of the fact Jesus accepted her invitation. The love of Christ is in her life. The love of Christ is in her home. She just got dragged away from seeing it. I love to play the what-if game. Many of our members know that. I love to play the what-if game with scriptures. My what-if game with this is, what if Martha had come to Jesus and said, Jesus, don't you care? What if she'd come to Jesus and just simply said, I'm overwhelmed. I need help. If you don't want dinner for breakfast, find someone. What would Jesus do? I don't think he would have sent Mary to help. I think he would have gotten up himself and begun peeling the potatoes. You hear the words of Jesus, I came not to be served, but to serve. I can't change your week for you. You will get dragged around. And no matter how much you do, I promise you, it will not be enough. But as you get dragged around this week, realize there is only one thing you need. Maybe more things you need to do, but there is one thing you need as you go about doing them. Never lose sight of the fact that God is your host, and He has prepared a place at His table for you. And it is His hospitality and love that invites you to this table, to this kingdom. And like Mary, you too leave this place with a promise that love will never be taken away from you. I don't like to give advice in sermons because they're really not lessons, they're proclamations, but today I will do the exception. This week you will find yourself somewhere stopping in confusion saying, what do I need to do next? Before you ask yourself that phrase, just stop and say, the love of Christ is here. And watch how that changes your answer. Amen.